Welcome to the Life-Changing Day YouTube channel. Today, I will bring you a story titled, The Watch on Maple Street. Chapter 1. The 3 p.m. School Bus. In the suburbs of Willow Creek, autumn always arrived with the brilliant crimson of old maple trees. But this year, leaves littered the driveway of house number 402, and no one bothered to sweep them away. Every day at exactly 3:30 p.m., when the sunlight began to slant through the canopy of trees, Rusty would struggle to stand up. He was an aging golden retriever, his once honey-colored coat now dull and speckled with gray around the muzzle. Arthritis made his hips stiff, but he would still drag himself out from the rhododendron bush where he usually slept. Climbing the steps to the front porch, he sat there, solemn as a statue, his sad brown eyes staring fixedly toward the end of the street. He was waiting for the yellow school bus. In Rusty's simple memory, the screech of the bus brakes and the hiss of the hydraulic doors opening always signaled the best moment of the day. That was when Ethan, his 17-year-old owner with messy hair and a fraying Letterman jacket, would jump off the bus. Ethan would toss his backpack onto the grass, drop to his knees, and let Rusty lick his face all over. "Hey buddy, did you miss me, big guy?" But 18 months had passed since that bus last stopped. Ethan never stepped off again. A tragic car accident on the night of senior prom had taken the young boy away, leaving a vast emptiness in house number 402. Ethan's parents, collapsed by grief, moved to Florida immediately after the funeral. They couldn't bear to see their son's empty room every day. The house was slapped with a "for sale" sign. Rusty was supposed to go with them, but on moving day, he had broken free from the car, ran back to the old porch, growled, and clung to the porch column, refusing to leave. The neighbors, Mr. and Mrs. Miller at house number 404, had volunteered to look after him. "Just let him stay here until he moves on," they said, but they didn't anticipate that Rusty would never move on. Chapter 2. The Neighbors Across the Fence. Next door, Sarah Miller stood by the kitchen sink, looking through the window. The sight of the old dog sitting under the cold October wind made her heart constrict. "David, he's out there again," Sarah said, her voice choking up. David Miller, her husband, was sitting and watching football news on TV. He sighed, stood up, walked over to his wife, and placed a hand on her shoulder. "He's a loyal dog, Sarah, perhaps more loyal than most humans." The Miller household was a quiet home, perhaps too quiet. They were a typical middle-class American couple. David was an engineer, Sarah a retired teacher, but hidden behind that tranquility was a wound that hadn't healed. They had spent their youth chasing fertility treatments, enduring 3 failed rounds of IVF, only to accept living in a large house devoid of children's laughter. The presence of Rusty, a creature also lonely and waiting for something that would never arrive, acted as a mirror reflecting their own pain. "The forecast says we're in for a harsh winter this year," David said, squinting at the gray sky. "That fur isn't warm enough, and that porch offers no shelter from the wind." Sarah wiped her hands on a dish towel, her eyes determined. "I won't let him freeze to death out there. I'm making meatloaf tonight. Rusty likes meatloaf." Chapter 3. The Christmas Eve Invitation. Getting Rusty into the house was harder than they imagined. He wasn't aggressive, but he was stubborn. To Rusty, leaving the porch of number 402 meant abandoning his post, just in case Ethan returned. But the Minnesota winter was no joke. A week before Christmas, the temperature plummeted below zero. Snow began to fall heavily. That evening, David put on his thick parka and carried a steaming bowl of food. He walked over to the neighbor's porch and sat down on the snow-covered steps, right next to Rusty. "Hey there, buddy," David said, his voice deep and warm. "Ethan isn't coming home tonight. The storm is too big." Rusty looked up, ears drooping, snowflakes clinging to his white eyebrows. "Come home with me, okay? I have a fireplace, and Sarah is baking cookies. You like the smell of butter, don't you?" David didn't pull on the leash. He simply set the bowl of food down, then stepped back and opened his own garage door. Warm yellow light and heat from the house spilled out, creating a path of light across the white snow. Rusty looked at the sealed door of house 402. then looked at David. He whined softly, a painful sound akin to crying. Finally, the bone-chilling cold and the aroma of food won out. He slowly stood up, followed David into the garage, and then into the living room. That night, Rusty slept on the thick rug in front of the fireplace. In his dreams, his legs twitched. Perhaps he was dreaming of running on the football field with Ethan under the summer sun. Chapter 4. Mended Fragments. The first few weeks living in the Miller house were a silent battle. Rusty was depressed. He lay flat all day, ignoring the expensive toys Sarah bought. Every time he heard the rumble of a delivery truck or the screech of a bus, he would rush to the window, barking loudly. Sarah understood that feeling. She remembered the days she sat in the empty nursery, folding and unfolding baby clothes that would never be worn. "You miss the boy, don't you?" Sarah whispered, sitting on the floor and stroking Rusty's head. "I understand. Waiting is the cruelest thing." The turning point came at Thanksgiving. Their niece, Emily, 8 years old, came to visit from Chicago. Emily was an energetic girl with bright eyes and a gummy smile. Seeing Rusty lying sadly in the corner, Emily didn't hesitate to crawl right into his space. "Hello, Mr. Dog. Do you want to see my doll?" Emily didn't look at Rusty as a tragedy. She looked at him as a playmate. She tied ribbons on his head, read Dr. Seuss books to him, and secretly fed him pieces of turkey under the dining table. Emily's innocence awakened a protective instinct in Rusty. For the first time in 2 years, his tail wagged slightly. When Emily ran out to the backyard to play in the snow, Rusty limped after her, barking happy, echoing barks, trying to catch the snowballs she threw. David stood by the window, a cup of hot coffee in his hand, smiling as he watched his wife. "Look at that, Sarah. He's smiling. The dog is smiling." Sarah nodded, eyes tearing up. She realized that in caring for Rusty's pain, her own pain was slowly dissipating. The house was no longer cold. It had the sound of dog claws clicking on the hardwood floor, and the peaceful sighs of a living being who was loved. Chapter 5. The Historic Blizzard. In February, a historic blizzard hit the town. Power was out across the entire area. The wind screamed through the window cracks like a train whistle. In the darkness, thundersnow exploded across the sky. Rusty became extremely panicked. The loud booms triggered memories of the accident, of metal crushing and tires screeching. He began to scratch frantically at the front door, blood seeping from his nail beds. He thought Ethan was out there, in the storm. "Rusty, stop. It's okay." David tried to hold him back, but fear gave the old dog a terrifying strength. He broke free from the latch, bolting out into the white, pitch-black night. "Oh my God, David!" Sarah screamed. Without hesitation, David grabbed a flashlight and rushed out into the storm. The wind whipped his face, stinging like needles. The snow was knee-deep. He found Rusty at the porch of House 402. The dog was digging frantically in a pile of snow, barking into the void, trying to find his boy. "Rusty, Ethan is gone. He's gone." David screamed over the roaring wind, rushing to hug the shivering dog tight. "But I am here. Dad is here. Let's go home, son." David called himself Dad. A large branch from an old oak tree cracked and came crashing down right next to them. David used his body to shield Rusty. In that life or death moment, Rusty stopped struggling. He buried his head into David's coat, smelling a familiar scent, the smell of wood, of machine oil, and of safety. He understood that the watch at House 402 was over. He didn't need to guard the past anymore. He had a present to protect. Chapter 6. A New Spring. When the snow melted and buds began to sprout on the maple branches, Rusty had changed. He no longer went to the porch to wait for the bus at 3:30 p.m. Instead, around 5:30 p.m., when David's Ford F-150 turned into the driveway, Rusty was already waiting at the garage door, his tail wagging furiously. He had found a new purpose, greeting David after work and resting his head on Sarah's feet while she watched evening TV. House number 402 was finally sold to a young couple. When they moved in, Rusty just watched through the fence, gave a polite tail wag, and turned back toward the Miller's house. He had let go. A year later, Rusty had aged significantly. The vet said his heart was weak. On a sunny afternoon in May, Rusty lay on the lush green grass of the backyard. David and Sarah sat beside him, brushing his soft fur. Rusty breathed lightly, his eyes half closed, looking up at the blue sky. In his blurring vision, it seemed as though a yellow school bus had just stopped at the gates of heaven. The door opened, and a young boy with a radiant smile stepped down, opening his arms wide. Rusty took his last breath, gentle as a midday nap. Epilogue. They buried Rusty under the large maple tree in the backyard, where he loved to sunbathe. On a small stone marker, David carved the words, "Rusty, a faithful friend. The one who taught us how to love again." Rusty's passing left sadness, but not emptiness. Thanks to him, the Miller home had become warm again. They began volunteering, opening their hearts to the neighborhood. A few months later, on a Sunday morning, Sarah received a phone call from social services. "Mrs. Miller? Regarding the adoption application you and your husband resubmitted last month. We have a little boy who needs a home urgently." Sarah looked at David, tears streaming down her face. But they were tears of happiness. Outside, the wind rustled through the maple leaves. It seemed that somewhere in the breeze, there was the happy bark of an old dog and the laughter of a young boy. Blessing the new beginning for those left behind. Pain will pass, but on Maple Street, love remains forever. The end. Thank you for taking the time to listen to my story. I wish you joy, good health, and success. I'll see you again in the next stories.